Hi everyone, it's Colleen. I'm back today with an awesome technique for the February Coffee Break Challenge. We're going to make a mixed media background using the mixed media embossing brush and lots of embossing powder. Are you ready? I'm not sure if I am, but let's go. Let's give it a try. So the first step for me was to figure out what inspires me when I think of coffee. And I thought about these colors. So right now I'm taking all the supplies out that you are going to need if you want to do this technique. And we'll go through this in more detail as we go along. But for me, when I think of coffee, I think of colors and a lot of colors because my favorite coffee is a lavender honey. So that might help you to understand. So this is the mixed media embossing brush. It's really, really cool and it works in a similar way as the mixed media pad, but it's just you can use it in different ways. Now, I'm going to be combining Copper Fire Sparkles with another embossing powder, and you'll see here that I am using a metal spoon. You don't want to use a plastic spoon, and you don't want to put your embossing powders in anything other than the empty embossing containers that come from Wow, because it's made to remove the static. So you want to make sure that you're using only the embossing containers. So I mixed my chocolate caramel pearl with the other item. And now I'm going to be going in and I'm just randomly creating a design here, guys. I am winging this while I'm doing it. So you are going to be learning along with me here. So I noticed that I put way too much of the mixed media paste on here. Lesson learned, don't use as much. Start with less and build up if you need to. So you can see I'm taking a little extra time to spread it out a little more. And then I realized that I want to go from light to dark with my embossing powders. So I'm starting with the lightest color called Angel Eyes. And I'm going to place that over the areas where I had done my little embossing, mixed media embossing brush. And then I'm going to get my heat tool going here. I don't have my Wow heat tool with me, so I had to use another one, but I highly recommend you use the Wow heating tool because it heats things quickly and it will not warp the paper. But can you see up close here what it looks like when you begin to dry the embossing? You get a shine on there, and that's how you know your embossing powder is dry. Now you'll also see there are places that are bubbling up, and that's because I used too much of that embossing brush. For this mixed media piece, it's fine. But again, next time I won't use as much because in certain cases you don't want that bubbling up to go on. But for here, it's fine. So now I'm getting ready to add my next color and I'm just adding more of that brush and I'm going over the blue with it because that powder is dry. So you can go ahead and add your next one over it. And I'm going with Primary Purple Orchid. And you will see here it how it looks. You still see the blue in there, but now the purple shines up too. And again, I like purple because I love the lavender honey coffee, and lavender is purple. That's why I'm using purple. So now I'm heat embossing this as well. So basically, I'm going to heat emboss each layer, and using the Wow heat tool is good because when you're heat embossing this much, your paper can warp. So using a really strong hot heat tool and getting it good and hot for about 30 seconds before you use it's really important so you don't warp your paper. So going back in a third time here, getting ready to prep for my next color. And I was really having a good time with this, you guys. I was just like so pleasantly surprised by how this turned out. I wasn't sure, but I am having a good time and I'll be using this embossing brush a lot more. So now I'm coming in with Manuela's Honey. And you're going to see with Manuela's Honey, do you see those little white dots in there? That is like an ultra high embossing powder. And so you want to tap very, very gently so you don't knock off all of those little white specks of embossing powder off your paper. So when you're using that type of embossing powder, tap very lightly, and then come in and heat dry it from the back side of your paper. Because if you bring that heat tool to the front side of your paper, all those little white speckles are going to blow right off your page. But if you can see here, if you come in from the back end, it will dry, and then those little puffy marshmallowy things will expand and look awesome. You get a lot of texture, which is great for a mixed media piece. So you can see here, I'm heat embossing this from the back and it's working out just fine. And you can see all that glorious texture coming there. And so next I'm doing it again, but this time I'm using Tisheni Sky. And that has the same thing. That also has the ultra high embossing powder along with fine embossing powder. So once again, very gentle tapping so you don't knock all of that off of your paper. And it will stay if you tap it gently, and you might have to do it more than one time to get that those little white speckles to stay on your piece, and that's fine. So now I'm going in with my last piece and my last color, and that was the color I mixed together earlier, which was the chocolate caramel pearl, and then the copper sparkles. I mixed them together so that you would get a really cool look. And I put it in one of the empty containers that you can get through Wow Embossing Powder. And the empty containers are awesome because you can mix your powders to your heart's delight, like I just did. Just make sure you don't use plastic and you don't use any other containers. You want the static to stay out of there. So look at how that looks now. It's so awesome. I was so happy with it. So now it's time to do the next step, which is some embossing. So I'm going to emboss a white sheet of paper and I'm using a die cut, but I'm going to actually put an impression in there rather than die cut it. And here I'm going to die cut it. And I got to be honest with you guys, I was a little bit sad about cutting up that gorgeous background, but you'll see how pretty it looks in the end. So it's kind of funny because I started to place these pieces through the die cut, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I went back and I put an impression on the white paper. So now you can see the background through the impression on the white paper, and I was able to put all my little colored pieces back over it. And that was a lot easier than trying to shove it through a die cut and make it work that way. That was not happening. So right now I'm just putting everything together, placing all my little pieces back on over the original impression that is on the white paper. And once that's done, then you see how it looks. Isn't that cool? So that's the positive part, and this is the negative part, which is basically the outline. So I got two cards with one background. So now it's time to work on my sentiment because those backgrounds are so gorgeous. You really don't need anything more than just the sentiment. And I'm using Catherine Pooler's Life Love Latte. I thought this was a really fun kind of stamp to use. So you see me here. I just did my anti-static prep. And now I'm going in and I'm going to condition my embossing pad with the embossing ink pad refill and conditioner. And you can do this every single time you go to emboss, and it adds a lot of juiciness and inkiness to your embossing pad. So I really recommend that you get that when you buy your embossing pad. So now I'm ready to stamp my sentiment, which is Life Love Latte. And I stamp it or I ink it up a second time just to make sure I get full coverage when I add my embossing powder. And now I'm going to emboss it with the chocolate caramel pearl embossing powder because that is my all-time favorite embossing powder. And it reminds me of coffee. The color of a beautiful cup of coffee. I love coffee, guys. I'm not sure about you, but I love my coffee in the morning. Best time of the day. So now I'm going to go in and do my other stamp. And I decided to use that little coffee cup that says life is too short for bad coffee. And amen to that. I like a good cup of coffee. And so originally I was going to stamp this with a kind of a turquoise blue stamp, but at the last minute, I decided that I would use the Angel Eyes embossing powder and just emboss it because it's pretty similar in color. And I really want to show you the versatility of all these embossing powders. So now that these have been heat embossed and cut down, I am ready to start placing everything onto my card and finish my cards up. That right there is a little handmade wobble. And I am actually going to take that little latte cup and make it into a wobble. And on one of my other videos, I do show you how to make the wobble, and I give you, and there's a reference to where you can go to find out. But you can just Google, how to make a handmade wobble card and find out how to do it on your own. So here I'm just trying to decide if I want this on a black background or a white background, and I decided for the white. And I'm just adhering this to my card base. And then I'm going to get ready to place my sentiment over that. So then that is all there is to that card. It's really nice because when you have such a busy background like this, you don't need much more than your sentiment because the background is really the focal point. So isn't that pretty? Oh, I'm just so happy with that card. And now I'm having a struggle with trying to get the adhesive off of that little wobble, and then I went with liquid glue instead. So now I am gonna place this over a black card base because I felt like this just popped more on a black card base. So once I get done prepping that, then I can go ahead and put my little latte coffee cup on there, and that's it for this. So keep in mind here that when you're doing your coffee break card, you don't necessarily have to use a coffee stamp. What do you think of when you think of coffee or even tea? Do you think of colors? Do you think of a mood? Um, Use your imagination and you'll come up with something great. So if you do decide to join our challenge this month, you can do it on Instagram or on Facebook and use the hashtag Wow Embossing Challenge so that we can find your card and comment on your glorious creations. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Bye.